Crook TV.
Meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, tonight we don't have an agenda, my fault. So we'll breeze through that. But what we are here to do is an overview and get the books handed out, and then we start in earnest with next week. We have a review of the admin and a few other categories that go with that. And so this first subcommittee is on a short leash because we have to have the meeting and be able to make a presentation next Thursday. And for those, Kevin, Skip, Sue, and Dick are the guys on that subcommittee. Who's going to set up that?
Dick, as a point of order, I just was looking at the people that were signed to the different, or volunteered for different things. There's 3 of them with 4 people on them and 3 with only 2 people. Is that acceptable?
We always set a minimum of 2 and a desirable 3.
Okay.
And, you know, 4 if somebody extra wants to go, we've never had a problem.
I'd drop from fire to planning to balance it out a little bit.
That'd be fine.
If you want to do that.
That'd be fine, we'll make that change.
Excuse me, Dick, I never got the email.
Well, normally the school and the selectmen don't participate in the
Okay.
subcommittees.
But feel free to volunteer for
You're
everyone.
welcome to go.
No, that's fine, I have lots of other things.
You're welcome to go to them, but in general, you two have
Okay.
been excluded from that. Although you should still be on the email. I'll have to check to make sure. Okay, so
That was the day that they...
Dave, we're going to put you on
Drop off
planning.
of fire.
You didn't get that one?
Drop down to planning.
Now there's 3 on fire and 2 on planning, so you'll make the other one, that's all right.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to do, was balance it out a little bit.
Well, I'm on fire, so it's Pat.
What's on fire?
I'm on fire.
Okay, you're on fire, right?
So Pat. And who else?
Fred.
Fred.
Now, let's see, the other thing, just while we're talking about subcommittees, the planning subcommittee does the Conservation Commission also. You know, which is short and sweet, but it needs to be done by somebody, and that's the appropriate place. Okay, why don't we, before we talk about the budget and overview and so forth or whatever, I see we have a member of the public here, and if you'd like to give us some input. We don't have to, or it's up to you.
Sure.
I'm
Barbara Eichinger, Edgewater Drive. Just thank everybody for their service, and to state that in case you were not aware, the state of New Hampshire did cut their budget 11%. So that was not a cut in their increase. That was actually a budget cut of 11%. And just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that. Thank you.
Okay, is the town planning on doing it? I've read through this in the brief time we've had, your overview in the book, which is a pretty nice overview.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion.
Yeah.
The motion I would like to make is that anyone on the Budget Committee that has any financial interest, directly or indirectly, contained within the budgets that we are analyzing, should recuse themselves. Further, anyone that has already had a material interest in assembling the budgets to be overseen by this committee should be allowed to comment but not vote on such budgets, as that would effectively give them an unfair advantage of representation by having the ability of voting twice on a budget that they represent, while the rest of the committee gets but a single vote.
So you're talking about school and select.
That is correct. And I will pass this out.
Notice how I could slice right through it.
I'll second it so people can comment on it.
Yeah.
I think that'll be...
Now, have you delved into the RSAs on this?
No, I have not.
Because, you know, the reason the committee is stacked up like it is those two participate
I'm sorry.
for that reason. Do you have any knowledge of that?
No, it is a voluntary request. It is not backed up by an RSA. They have the freedom to accept it or not, but I figured that I would bring it up before the board because of the events of the last meeting.
Yeah, it doesn't change. I think one of the benefits the town has is a large committee. And whether we have 10 people or 12 people, we have a large committee, and it's pretty well split the same way it is without those two or with those two. So from that perspective, I don't see a difference.
In the interest of, I guess this here, but, I mean, I've already given this some thought. I have a financial conflict of interest with the road improvement budget. And I do some subcontracting for one of the major contractors. In fact, I work for him today in Gilford. So I'm going to recuse myself from that portion of the budget.
I have obviously given this quite a bit of thought too, starting several years ago, about 4 years ago, before I ran the first time. And at that time, I made a commitment to the voters that I would, I said this: I will participate in votes on the public library budget. I will not participate in votes related to my wife's salary. Now, since this committee does not deal with individual salaries, usually doesn't look at them, doesn't vote on them, approve or disapprove, the possibility of that conflict coming up is pretty rare. It did come up last year, however. I think it was at the end of the budget year, Skip, when you had a series of motions to reduce the budget, and one of those dealt specifically with salaries of department heads, if I recall. And in accordance with the promise I had made to the voters, not once but twice, I abstained on that vote. So, you know, whether you agree with that approach or not, it's what I've taken. I'm comfortable with it. I've kept that promise. I've been elected twice, and on each one of those elections, this very issue was front and center. And thanks in no small part to yourself, Skip. You made sure that people were aware that I was related to someone in the town and how I voted on it. And the voters weighed in twice, and I won both times, last time by a pretty good margin. So that's my position. And that's how I'll move forward with this. As far as other conflicts, you know, I leave it up to you guys. Whether it's a business issue or the fact that you're suing the school, I leave it up to you guys to decide. You make the decision same way I did. If you run again, the voters can weigh in and indicate whether or not they agree with your decision, same way they weighed in with me. So that's my perspective. There was one other issue that came up on this, and this was services to the town, similar to your business, trucking business. My business is providing websites to public libraries, and I provide one to the Gilford Public Library. My way out of that conflict is I've never charged, donate 100% of my services. First couple of years, there was a hosting company that used to bill me a couple $100 a year, and I'd pay that and pass that through. But about 5 years ago, I quit doing that. I cover all costs, support, hosting, email, everything. So it's 100% donated. That's my way out of that conflict. So that's my position. That's where I'm at.
I also have a position. First of all, I would like to go and on record in saying that I think that somebody would write to think that I would not be smart enough to know that I would recuse myself from the fire department budget, I think is a little out of control. But as far as the school part, I am on the school board, and I think that I should have a say and a vote in the school budget. Why should anything be different this year than it has been in years past?
I guess I'm to say, I appreciate Kevin recusing yourself from that DPW item you talked about, but I don't think you need to.
Yeah.
Honestly, I really don't think you need to. But let me say this, if you're gonna do that, then you shouldn't even be on that subcommittee. My wife works in the schools, when I ran for election 4 years ago, I hid nothing. Everybody knows who I am. Everybody knows my wife works in the schools. We have nothing to do with school employee salaries. Nothing to do with teacher salaries. But, again, I ran 4 years ago. Everybody knew that. I just missed out on being elected by 30 votes. I ran again the next year. I took the third seat easily, defeating, we had quite a run that year. We had 7 or 8 candidates. I took that seat easily. People know what I'm here for. I made it clear I support the schools. I support every town department. I am not recusing myself from any school voting. I do not sit on the elementary school subcommittee at all. I never have, never will. Dale's never been on the library subcommittee. So, right now, I'm not recusing myself.
I'm recusing myself from that portion of the budget because the standard I'm using is if money's from that budget ends up in your personal household, much less half your family income, then that's a very clear conflict of interest, Kevin, Dale, anybody. I'm not singling anybody out, I just did, but I shouldn't have. But that's a very clear conflict of interest. I have, like I said, I do a lot of work for a certain contractor, does a lot of work in this town. Money ends up in my household. I don't, that's a conflict of interest. As far as me and Dave here being involved in legal action against the school board, that's not a conflict of interest. I have nothing to gain from that, financially from that legal action. I have nothing to gain from the school board. I mean, it doesn't matter how much money the school budget is, I don't gain anything. None of it ends up in my pocket. There is no conflict of interest there. So, I mean, we're using two different standards. Dale, you've now, last week, made several comments about the, and I just want to go on record, let you know that it was Dale and Mr. Quarry who actually recommended that we sue the school board. After that hearing, they pulled me aside and they actually said, if you think you have a case, then why don't you sue them? We recommend you do it.
And we're not going into those discussions, but my opinion is, you don't have to recluse yourself for either of them. Now, if you want to do that, it's your prerogative. I know a few years ago, I can't remember the total context of the question, but I went to one of these September meetings where they have for the budget committee, and I corralled a lawyer from the government center. And I'd made some comment at the time, it may have had to do with Dale at the first time, about whether we could make rules that precluded a member from voting. She said no. She said those were elected officials, the rules were made by elections. And you as a committee cannot stop people from doing something. When it comes to these two, that's a volunteer. I suppose we can or we can't. It doesn't seem to make any difference to me one way or the other. But I believe we'd be hard pressed to stop any of the other 10 from voting on anything.
I think we'd be hard pressed to stop these two as well, although I don't know what the statutes say about it.
Because we
You
are
know, we've been doing
elected
that for
officials.
multiple years and it seems to
Right.
work effectively. Whereas your choice, I applaud your choice, make your commitment and keep it
You know,
at
I can't, like I said in that letter, I can't force anybody to do anything. It's up to you. If your moral and ethical standards is that low, then.
Well, I think it's up to you. That's your own
Do I
prerogative.
need to take a shot like that, Dick?
No,
No, listen,
let's stop
what did he
all
just
of it.
say?
It's up to
If
you.
your
It's
moral
up
and
to
ethical
you.
standards are that low,
It's very clear conflict of interest, Kevin. It's up to you. If you don't want to do it, that's fine.
It's been- like I just said,
stand over
we
there and
can,
thump your chest
May
some
we can't control this thing, so I'll let ladies before gentlemen fill us.
Thank you. I have two things to say on the subject. Number one, my understanding is that these two people represent the budget, the committees that they sit on. You represent the selectmen, you represent the school board. You are speaking, when you sit here and vote, you are voting the way you were the way the vote comes down at your boards, at the
Yeah,
select
it's not
board.
personal.
It's not a personal vote, it's the way you vote, because I remember at first or second year when Dennis Stoughton was here, he got up and said on an issue that he was voting yes, because that's the way the selectmen had decided, that was the way the selectmen board went. They were voting yes on this issue. Personally, when he votes in the voting booth, he was voting no, but he was voting no as a personal issue, he was voting for the select board, so I don't see any reason why they're here to represent their units, and they're voting the select board, so I don't see why they have to recuse themselves and not vote on when they're up. The other thing, this behavior of this board is appalling to me, and I haven't even been to a meeting yet, except I've been listening to it play out in the papers, and if we can't behave like the elected officials and be civil to one another, then we don't deserve to be in this room. If we can't behave on a town of Gilford size like adults, it's no wonder that as we watch the rest of the government in the United States, city, state, and national, no wonder they can't behave. If we as local representatives of the people in this town can't behave like adults. And
Well,
I would really
Dave's
hope
next.
by the end of this session that we would stop and talk to each other civilly.
Well, first of all, yeah, we just ought to drop that whole subject so we don't offer the opportunity. Dave, you're next.
Croc TV.